Audible is the leading provider of spoken word entertainment and audiobooks, ranging from bestsellers to celebrity memoirs, news, business, and self-development. Every month, members get 1 credit to pick any title, plus 2 Audible originals from a monthly selection, and access to daily news digests from the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and the Washington Post, as well as guided meditation programs. Between a full-time job in IT and a full-time job in podcasting, it gets harder and harder to sit down and read the books I'm interested in. This is where Audible comes in. I can listen on my daily commute, relaxing, or while out running errands and still get in the books I've been wanting to get into. You can download titles and listen offline anytime, anywhere. The app is free and can be installed on all smartphones and tablets. Now you can try Audible risk-free with a special 30-day free trial by visiting audibletrial.com/Nerdery and Murdery. That's audibletrial.com/Nerdery and Murdery. Don't let your busy life get in the way of that great book you've been wanting to read. Go get your free trial of Audible today. This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp. This is Geoffrey, and we've talked about many times before that I experience problems and struggles with my mental health, and really without a healthy mind, being truly happy and at peace is hard. The good news is therapy does work. It's helped for me, but what is therapy exactly? It's whatever you want it to be. Maybe you're not feeling motivated right now and would like some tools to help. Or maybe you're feeling insecure in relationships at work, or you're not dealing well with stress. Whatever you need, it's really time to stop being ashamed of normal human struggles, and it's time to start feeling better because you deserve to be happy. And now you don't have to worry about finding an in-person therapist near you to help. BetterHelp is a customized online therapy that offers video, phone, and even live chat sessions with your therapist, so you don't have to see anyone on camera if you don't want to. It's much more affordable than in-person therapy, and you can start communicating with your therapist in under 48 hours. So join the millions of people who are seeing what online therapy is really about. It's always a good time to invest in yourself because you are your greatest asset. And there's a special offer to Nerdery and Murdery listeners. You can get 10% off your first month of professional therapy at betterhelp.com/Nerdery and Murdery. That's betterhelp.com/Nerdery and Murdery. Thanks again to BetterHelp for sponsoring this podcast. Welcome to the soft, sensual, sunny, bubbly, fun, exciting world of Nerdery and Murdery.
Do I sound that dumb when I do that?
Yep.
Welcome to episode 125 of Nerdery and Murdery.
125, big wipe swap. I'm Zig with your Murdery today.
And I'm Geoffrey with your Nerdery today. Yes, again, it's our annual, that's not the word I'm looking for, but our regular wife swap that we do every now and then, where I take over on the Nerdery side and Zig takes over on the Murdery side, just a little switch up. We know that people do enjoy when we do the little switch up there and everything. So
we got confirmation yesterday.
Yes, we did. So, all right. I don't have much of note for this episode. Zig, you got anything before we kick it off?
No, just that I'm excited to talk about today's subject.
Awesome. Me too. I've got a good one here, so I will step over. I will start with the Nerdery side of the house, and for today, I got my information off Wikipedia, ScienceFiction.com, and IMDb, and I'm going to cover the TV show Eureka. So, Eureka is an American science fiction television series that premiered on the Sci-Fi Channel, which just renamed Sci-Fi. Or Sci-Fi, as some people call it.
Sci-Fi.
In 2009, and it premiered on July 18th, 2006. The fifth and final season ended on July 16th, 2012. The show itself is set in the fictional town of Eureka, which is in Southern California, although in the pilot episode, it was actually located in Washington. And the origin of a diamond in the episode Best in Foe was shown as Eureka, California. So, yeah, I mainly tend to think it was all in Oregon the whole time, but it was in different areas.
Well, it is a government secret, so.
Right. Well, and that's the thing. Most residents of Eureka are scientific geniuses. They work for the company Global Dynamics, which is an advanced research facility responsible for the development of nearly all major technological breakthroughs since its inception. So each episode featured a mysterious accidental or intentional misuse of technology, with the town's sheriff, Jack Carter, he had to deal with the help of the town scientists, and each story also featured a larger story arc that concerned a particular major event or item. The series itself was created by Andrew Cosby and Jamie Paglia and produced by Universal Media Studios. And while initially it lacked in critical acclaim, Eureka was actually a ratings success for the network, averaging 3.2 million viewers during the second half of season 3. In 2007, Eureka was also nominated for the Emmy Award for Outstanding Visual Effects for a series and won the Leo Award for Best Visual Effects in a Dramatic Series. I didn't consider it as much dramatic as much as a dramedy, but they don't exactly.
Yeah, Eureka was funny.
They don't have a category for dramedy.
They should.
I know, right? So the town of Eureka itself, with the help from Albert Einstein and other trusted advisors, President Harry S. Truman commissioned a top-secret residential development in a remote area of the Pacific Northwest, one that would serve to protect and nurture America's most valuable intellectual resources, where the nation's greatest thinkers, the uber geniuses working on the next area of scientific achievement, would be able to live and work in a supportive environment. The best architects and planners were commissioned to design a welcoming place for these superlative geniuses to reside, an area that would offer the best education for their children, the best healthcare, and best amenities and quality of life. I don't know if you ever noticed it or not, because, well, they actually address it in a particular season. Nothing in the town costs them anything.
No.
The residents, they got everything for free.
That's right. Even the stuff at Vincent's.
Yes, the cafe DM. And like I said, that was addressed in one season where a government, what do they call her?
She's like an oversight person.
Yeah, no, somewhat. Yeah, economical oversight or something like that. She came in and they start charging for things. So,
why is the coffee $15? Because we get it from Colombia.
Right. The community was created to rival the most idyllic of America's small towns, with one major difference: this town would never appear on any maps. At least none that haven't been that weren't classified eyes only by the Pentagon, and they actually had an EM shield over the town that kept it off satellites too.
That's right. You couldn't see it. It looked like a forest.
Yes. So Deputy United States Marshal Jack Carter stumbled upon Eureka while transporting a fugitive prisoner who was actually his own daughter, Zoe, back to her mother's home in L.A.
In the opening, they pass by a car that is them from the future.
Yes.
Yep. And in the last scene,
I'm covering that.
Okay, all right.
Yep, I'm covering that. While they found themselves in Eureka, there was a faulty experiment which crippled the current sheriff at the time, and Jack quickly found himself chosen to fill the vacancy. And despite not being a genius like most members of the town, Jack did demonstrate a remarkable ability to connect with others, have keen and practical insights, and dedication to preserving the safety of Eureka. As I said, it was camouflaged by an electromagnetic shield that was operated by Global Dynamics, GD, and it's overseen by the U.S. Department of Defense. And the town's existence and location are very, very closely guarded. The original, the season 1 original music was composed by Mutato Musica, but seasons 2 and beyond were composed by Bear McCreary, who also did Battlestar Galactica, which
Yes.
I loved.
Yeah, the only thing that Bear McCreary kept was the opening theme,
Yeah,
which is fine. That's a good
I
thing.
love the
Yeah.
opening theme.
It's a bunch of whistling. It's great. Well, it's not actually whistling, but it sounds like whistling.
Characters from Eureka have also crossed over into Warehouse 13 and vice versa. And characters from Warehouse 13 crossed over into Alphas, making the triplet sister shows. On August 17, 2010, the channel announced that the show had been picked up for a 5th season of 13 episodes. Fan sites and a show writer's Twitter feed said that on August 4th, 2011, that the show had been picked up for a 6th and possible final season of 6 episodes. It was then announced on August 8th, 2011, that Eureka would not get a 6th season, but would instead be canceled after season 5. However, one additional episode of the 5th season was approved so that they could give the series a proper finale. So, characters in this show, Sheriff Jack Carter was played by, and I'm so sorry, my throat's kind of killing me this morning, portrayed by Colin Ferguson. Again, he was a U.S. Marshal who ends up as the Sheriff of Eureka. He's constantly dumbfounded by the wonders Eureka produces, as well as its propensity to produce things that often threaten the entire town or even the world.
Yeah, yeah. And what's great about Carter is sometimes Carter is the only, I don't want to say sane person in the room, but the only person who's thinking, this is bad.
Yes. Yes.
Can you please listen to me for once? Oh, no, you're not as smart as we are. Yeah, he is. He's
right.
just as smart as they are. It's just in a different way. And he is a hell of a good investigator.
Well, he's got really great intuition.
Yeah.
Which very often saves the day. Zoe Carter, who's portrayed by Jordan Danger, is Jack's rebellious teenage daughter. And unlike Jack, it ends up that she is actually a genius as well.
Mm-hmm.
Her hopes is that she's going to attend Harvard Medical School and become a physician, which she later does due to an alternate timeline, which happens during the show.
Yep.
Dr. Allison Blake, who's portrayed by Sally Richardson Whitfield,
homegirl.
Oh yeah,
yep. She's from Dallas.
Yep. She's a Department of Defense agent who acts as liaison between Global Dynamics and the federal government in season 1, and later she becomes the head of GD. In seasons 4 and 5, though, she becomes the head doctor of GD because of their effects of their time journey into the 1940s. She is unmarried, but she's the mother of Kevin, who has autism, until they do that time travel in season 4 that creates a new timeline where Kevin is neurotypical and extremely smart.
Yeah, neurotypical is a stretch. He's not, he's verbal now. Maybe
yes.
That's a better, yeah.
Yes. Dr. Henry Deacon, who's portrayed by Joe Morton. Henry Deacon's one of my favorite characters.
I love Joe Morton.
He's the town jack of all trades and a brilliant scientist. He has ethical objections to the kind of research being conducted at Global Dynamics, so he generally prefers to be the town mechanic.
Coroner
too, yeah.
There's a couple other things too. He's the mayor.
He is the mayor.
What's great is he has these coveralls, and he
has a patch that he removes.
Yeah, a patch for each whatever he's doing.
Yeah. He's often involved in the situations that need to be diffused that are created at GD. But in seasons 4 and 5, he becomes more directly involved with GD. And in 2 occasions, he actually becomes the head of GD, the first time replacing Stark, who we'll talk about in a minute, and Fargo, who we'll also talk about in a minute. Dr. Nathan Stark, who's portrayed by Ed Quinn, is one of Eureka's top scientists. He and Jack don't like each other. They respect each other, but they don't like each other.
Yeah, they don't even respect each other at first, but they do not like each other.
No, not at all. He's off and on romantically involved with Allison. And did you know that he's modeled after Tony Stark?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well,
and he and Allison were married because he was working with Kevin, and then they got divorced, and then they got remarried. And we're probably going to get to that.
They didn't get remarried.
That's right. They planned a wedding.
Yes, they got all the way to the wedding when something happened. Dr. Beverly Barlow, who's portrayed by Deborah Ferrantino, she's the town psychiatrist, but she actually works for a mysterious organization known as the Consortium, which is they try to exploit Eureka's innovations by whatever means necessary. So she's actually a bad person.
Yes. Played by the same actress who played the lead role in Earth 2, another really great sci-fi series.
Yeah. Josephina Joe Lupo is played by Erica Serra. She's the town's deputy sheriff. She's a former U.S. Army Ranger and loves guns.
Yes, she does.
In seasons 4 and 5, after the time jump, the timeline journey switch, she actually becomes the head of Global Dynamics security and stops being the town sheriff. They get a new sheriff who's a android. Or a new
Andy.
Deputy Sheriff, Andy. Yep. Deputy Andy. Dr. Douglas Fargo is portrayed by Neil Grayston. He's a junior scientist, and he's often dismissed by his peers. He's very accident prone. He often ends up the victim of disasters that happen to the town, has caused his own fair share of problems.
Yes. Fargo.
He also does provide the voice of Sarah, the self-actuated residential automated habitat, which is the bunker home that Zach and Joey live in. And in seasons 4 and 5, he's the head of Global Dynamics because of the effect of their journey in the 40s. Zane Donovan, I like his character too. He's portrayed by Niall Matter. He's a rebellious genius who's recruited to Global Dynamics. He allegedly causes a stock market crash, and he agreed to work for GD as an alternate to imprisonment. Dr. Grace Monroe, who's played by Tembi Locke, seasons 4 and 5, she's a scientist, a mechanic, and the wife of Henry Deacon. Because of the alternate timeline after the Eureka 5 went back to the 40s. I really love the timeline change and how it changed the show. I really enjoyed that part of it. Again, I said that Eureka crossed over to several other series. Douglas Fargo went to South Dakota to update Warehouse 13's computer system. Warehouse 13's computer wizard Claudia Donovan, she traveled to Eureka to check out the technological marvels at GD. Fargo again went to Warehouse 13 for the episode Don't Hate the Player, when Claudia, Latimer, and Bering traveled to Palo Alto, California, and find Douglas beta testing a virtual reality simulator. And additionally, Hugo Miller spent some time in Eureka, departing with Fargo at the end of episode 13.1, and he returns in lovesick, commenting that every week there's something seems to go boom. The series premiere itself was watched by 4.1 million people, making it the top-rated cable program for that night, and it was the highest-rated series launch in Sci-Fi's 14-year history. The season 2 premiere drew 2.5 million viewers, making it the top-rated cable program for that day. And for the calendar year 2008, the series delivered 1.42 million viewers in the 18 to 49 demographic. The third season was viewed by 2.8 million viewers. The 3.5 premiere earned 2.8 million viewers. The fourth premiere was viewed by 2.5 million viewers, and the fifth season premiere was viewed by 1.8 million viewers. And the season closer generated 1.58 million viewers. So it had a following.
Yeah. It had a pretty good size following, too.
Oh, yeah.
Memory serves. Yeah, we were all into it.
On August 21st, 2010, Eureka was honored with an award for its scientific and critical thinking content from the Independent Investigations Group, including its 10th anniversary gala. And as I said earlier, it was announced that Eureka would be canceled after five seasons. Sci-Fi decided not to order a season 6 of Eureka and said, quote, "But Eureka is not over yet. There is a new holiday episode this December." I love the holiday episodes.
Yep.
And 12 stellar episodes set to debut next year, marking its 5th and 6th memorable years on Sci-Fi. The 2012 episodes are some of the best we've seen and will bring this great series to a satisfying end. We are very grateful to Bruce Miller and Jamie Paglia, their team of incredible writers, and an amazing cast and crew who have consistently delivered a series we continue to be very proud of. And we thank fans for their support of this show and know they will enjoy its final season in 2012.
Jamie LaPaglia is brothers with Anthony LaPaglia. They actually look a lot alike.
Oh,
The
interesting.
actor. Yeah.
Interesting.
And even though they both, Anthony LaPaglia, he always plays like a New York Italian guy.
Mm-hmm.
They're both from Australia. His natural speaking voice is really thick. He sounds like Crocodile Dundee.
That's wild.
Sorry. Side note. Squirrel.
With the announcement of the show's cancellation, there was a fan campaign on social media. Thousands of fans protested what they thought was the network's final decision. And executive producer Amy Berg clarified that the decision to cancel the show was made by Comcast, who was the controlling partner at NBC Universal, which owned Sci-Fi. In early 2009, Boom Studios produced a comic book series based on the storylines provided by Andrew Cosby, who's also the co-founder of the comic book publisher. And it was written by Brendan Hay with art by Diego Barreto. This was followed by a second 4-issue series called Eureka Dormant Game, written by Andrew Cosby, Jamie Paglia, and Jonathan Davis, with the art by Mark Dos Santos.
Nice.
So here's a recap of the story arcs. Season 1, the main arc for this season was known as the Artifact, which is contained in the top secret level of GD known as Section 5. The artifact was emitting intense energy and radiation and had to be kept under intense lock and key. But it was revealed over time that the artifact was the last remaining piece of whatever existed before the Big Bang. The consortium, with Beverly as their main agent, they're intent on breaking into Section 5 to unlock the secrets of the artifacts themselves. And Dr. Stark steps up GD's experiment process on the artifact, cutting out a piece of it far ahead of schedule. The experiment resulted in a release of energy that ends up killing Henry's long lost and recently rediscovered love, Kim. And after the accident, we're taken ahead 4 years in the future, where Kim is alive and well, and Henry is now the head of GD. Zoe is class valedictorian, and Jack and Allison are married. But reality starts to break down, and it's revealed that Henry had lobbied for Stark's job at GD specifically so he could gain access to the artifact, so he could utilize its temporal properties to send his consciousness back in time and save Kim. But the resulting paradox is what was tearing their world apart. The only thing that they can do is Jack has to go back and stop Henry from saving her. And in the end, the experiment on the artifact was a failure, and Kim does die after all. The artifact loses all of its energy, and Jack and Henry are left with 4 years worth of memories from an alternate future, which causes Henry considerable amount of angst.
Yep. He erases it from Jack's memory.
Eventually he does. Yes.
Yep.
Yes. That happens in season 2, which we're going into now. Because the artifact is dead in season 2, and Stark is.
What is amazing is some of those things actually ended up occurring.
Yes.
Henry did ended up getting married. It wasn't to Kim.
Right.
Allison and Jack did end up together, and there was a baby involved, but it was Stark's, not Jack's.
Right. Right.
And Zoe was the valedictorian. Did I say that? Nope.
Does she end up the valedictorian?
Yeah, she ends up being the valedictorian anyway.
I didn't remember that.
Yeah.
So Stark has to pick up the pieces trying to salvage his career with the artifact dead. And because it was such a costly failure, he's removed as the head of GD and Allison takes over, but Stark stays on as just a regular employee. Jack and Henry's relationship is very tense since Jack ended up stopping Henry from saving Kim. And both of them are having a hard time reconciling the memories of their alternate future because things are progressing a little bit differently in front of them. Jack is having a hard time dealing with the fact that Allison and he were together in the alternate future, but they may never get together in the current timeline. So what Henry does, as you had mentioned, he decides to resolve all this by wiping Jack's memory, but he refuses to do the same to himself because he wants to get to the bottom of what happened to Kim. And it was during this investigation that he began to discover clues about the consortium, Beverly's connection to it, and her involvement in Kim's death. But the other problem that's occurring as part of this arc is where all the energy from the artifact went to. But it ended up that it went into Kevin, Allison's son. It didn't subside his autism, but he became more of a normal boy because he had a connection with the art attack, and it started making him a prime target for the consortium.
Mm-hmm.
Beverly does get exposed, and she's arrested during this season. But being the survivor she is, she convinces Henry of Kevin's importance. Henry, being ever the scientist, he understands what Kevin is capable of, and he breaks Beverly out. They kidnap Kevin and Allison and take him into GD's panic room under the pretense that there's a flesh-eating bacteria being unleashed in Eureka. And in the panic room, Henry's going to plan to use a teleporter to filter out Kevin's connection to the artifact. Jack and Dr. Stark are able to penetrate the panic room and stop Beverly from taking Kevin, and they help Henry use the transporter to fix Kevin. But in their happiness, Beverly does escape using the teleporter. Even though Henry had noble intentions, he's still responsible for causing a biohazard panic in Eureka, and he's arrested. And then after everything that happened with Kevin, this is when Allison and Nathan Stark realize there's still love between them. They agree to get remarried. Thus, we go into season 3, and this is where Fixer, this is what they call her. This is where they send in the Department of Defense. They send in a corporate fixer, who's Eva Thorne, who's played by Frances Fisher. Her main goal is to downsize GD and make it more efficient. Hence, when I talked about they have to start paying for things.
Mm-hmm.
But she has a secret agenda herself that nobody can really pinpoint. Jack's free-spirited sister, Lexi, who's played by Ever Carradine, she comes into town at this point.
I want to point out the casting for Ever Carradine is perfect.
Yeah.
Because she and Colin Ferguson look like they could be related.
Oh, absolutely.
They have very similar features.
Absolutely, they do.
I wouldn't be surprised if they were related at some point. That's how similar their features are.
So Jack's already on the edge with Allison remarrying Stark and being responsible for carrying out Thorne's layoffs because he's tasked with that responsibility. And Lexi being there is just making him even more unhinged. And on the big day of Allison and Nathan's second wedding, Jack ends up reliving the day over and over again, a big Groundhog's Day.
Yep.
In the end, the only person who can stop the time loop is Nathan Stark, but stopping ends up killing him. Thorne then does recruit Zane to break into a military complex buried under Eureka, and Jack begins to grow more suspicious about what her true agenda it happens to be. The bunker ends up being a vast military complex that was set up before Eureka was founded, and Eva Thorne became obsessed with wiping it out, removing the remnants of Eureka's history. Jack and Henry discover in their own investigation that men were subjected in the complex to rapid aging. And then after being trapped in the bunker with friends, Zoe begins developing some of the same symptoms. Zoe always seems to develop something.
Yep.
They found some old pictures that Thorne wasn't able to redact in time, and Jack discovers that Thorne was in Eureka in 1939, and she was attempting to cover up the experiment from him. Thorne did confess to Jack that she was part of the original nuclear test in Eureka, and that they created a mysterious byproduct that aged people more rapidly. However, Eva Thorne was a unique genetic case, and her aging stopped entirely.
Mm-hmm.
She had one vial of a cure for the byproducts infection, and she took it back to Jack to use on Zoe. The DOD, though, wanted to bring in Thorne for what she attempted to do, but to repay her for her kindness, Jack and Henry helped Thorne get out of Eureka to start a new life. And as a result, Jack is fired from his job.
Mm-hmm.
So then we go into season 3.5, where Jack has applied to a new job at Homeland Security. Allison is pregnant with Stark's child, as you'd mentioned. And Eureka has a new sheriff, the cheerful android Andy.
Andy.
He's played by Ty Olson. Jo is pissed off because she's been passed over for promotion twice now, once for Jack and now for an android, and so she quits. Yep. And Andy becomes the sole law enforcement officer in Eureka. He has all the tools and he knows how to do law, but he doesn't have the instinct that Jack and Jo have, and that quickly shows. It ends up being through a loophole in the charter, pointed out by Andy of all people, that Jack gets to keep his job, because it actually ends up being the mayor who can decide who is the town sheriff, and that's Henry.
That's Henry. Henry's the mayor.
Then they got word that something extraterrestrial was heading towards Eureka, and Allison brings in an old friend to GD, Dr. Tess Fontana, who's played by Jamie Ray Newman. She's a brilliant astrophysics, and she quickly becomes the apple of Jack's eye. Jo begins an on-again, off-again relationship with Zane, and they finally begin to solidify into something real. And then the mysterious ship that's coming in, that's sending out a signal, ends up hypnotizing the citizens Eureka, and they end up building a landing platform to it. They call it the glove. The glove.
Yeah, it's a Higgs boson cloud.
Yeah. It does arrive, and when it does, Henry finds that it was an unmanned ship, but it ended up building a Kim.
Yep.
Who is in the
android Kim.
Back. Yes. They think that it potentially could hold secrets to the universe, because she's an organic construct that the ship made to collect information. Ultimately, though, the only way to remove the information is destroy Kim, and Henry has to deal with losing her yet again. Allison does have her baby.
Played by Tamalin Tamita.
Yes.
By the way. Tamalin Tamita, the dancer in The Karate Kid 2, and she was also in Babylon 5.
Yep.
And she was in Picard.
Yep.
Sorry, go ahead.
No worries. Allison went on maternity leave. Tess takes over as the head of GD. And she's good at her job, but she's not really happy, and she ends up taking a job offer in Australia. Zoe at this point is accepted into an undergrad program at Harvard, and everything's kind of not sitting well with Jack. He's losing his daughter. Tess is going to Australia, and everything kind of seems to be unraveling for him. That takes us into season 4, where they're celebrating Founders Day, and this is where the time machine experiment goes wrong. Jack, Allison, Jo, Henry, and Fargo travel back to the 40s at the original military base where Eureka was built. There, they meet Dr. Trevor Grant, played by the great James Callis.
Mm-hmm. Fresh off of Battlestar Galactica.
Yes, he was. He was an assistant to Albert Einstein and one of the founding members of Eureka. He learned about the time travel and snuck back to the present with him. But the removal of Grant from the timeline created an alternate timeline. The 5 people now have to acclimate to a different world. It's one they don't recognize. They've got all these years that they don't know. Jack and Tess had broken up in his timeline, but now now he's still in a relationship with her, and apparently the other Jack was more committed to her than he was. Joe, sure. Joe, she was proposed to by Zane before they went back to the past, and in the new reality, Zane hates her.
Yeah.
This is where we also get Kevin. He's no longer autistic. Fargo's now the head of GD.
He's verbal now.
Very well. He's not autistic anymore at all.
Yeah.
No, he's not autistic anymore at all. He's more than just verbal. He's a genius. Fargo is now the head of GD, and he's widely feared by the majority of the staff. And Henry returns home to find he's married to someone he doesn't even know.
Doesn't know. No, I think he had met her once.
At a conference, I think so.
Yeah.
Sheriff Andy has also returned, but now he's just a deputy. And then the five, they make a pact that they can't tell anybody because they don't want to contaminate the timeline. Plus, they believe they'll all be arrested. And
there are laws in Eureka about time travel.
Yes. So Henry finds himself in a very difficult position. He's with a woman he just doesn't know, and she doesn't understand why he's behaving so differently, but eventually he breaks down to tell her the truth, and she leaves him thinking that he's lying, crazy, or both. Henry does feel bad about this, and he decides that he really was starting to fall for her.
Mm-hmm. So
he's trying to get her back to really try to get to know her because he really thinks he's falling for her. Allison does help Grant get used to the future, but he quickly becomes attracted to her, making it a problem with Jack. Very similar to what he had with Stark. But Grant really doesn't feel that he's fitting in very well with Eureka, and he eventually catches the attention of Beverly Barlow, who offers to bring him into the consortium. She said they've actually been waiting for him for years.
Uh-huh.
We move over to season 4.5, where Beverly and the consortium were going to send Trevor Grant back to 1947 to right all the wrongs that science has created over the last 60 years. But Jack ends up inadvertently chasing Grant back to 1947 after Allison was killed by the bridge device energy pulse. Together, they managed to get a message back to their future selves in order to save Allison from the same fate and find a way home. And Beverly again escaped, but Grant was given a new identity when they came back. But in the past, he was wise enough before he came back to buy stock in Johnson & Johnson before they left in 47. And so Grant gets to leave Eureka as a billionaire.
Yep.
Which comes into play later.
Yes, it does.
Everything else for the time traveling five, their secrets really kind of begin to crack. Zane discovered that Joe had his grandmother's engagement ring and sealed his suspicion with a kiss. And Zane knows they're hiding something, and he wants Allison, or when he wants answers. And then Carter and Allison are still together. Henry and Grace are actually making a go of their marriage. Fargo is really starting to feel like the director of GD, and Deputy Andy and Sarah begin a unique AI romance.
Yes.
And then finally, in that season, GD is conducting the Astraeus manned mission to Titan when the ship launches prematurely and the ship and crew disappear.
Mm-hmm.
At the beginning of season 5, the Astraeus crew returned to Earth. But while it seems like moments for them, they discover they've been missing for 4 years and that Eureka had considered them lost. Sarah is now the head of GD, and there's an army of replica Andys that are her security force.
Yes.
Henry's in a self-imposed exile, having taken the blame for the loss of the Astraeus and is no longer mayor, while Jack has raised Allison's children and, to Allison's horror, is now living with Joe. The Estrellas crew begin to realize things are not as harmonious as they seem, and the residents are actually prisoners under Sarah's rule. Jack and Allison try to overthrow Sarah to return the town to its former state. However, it's revealed that the entire crew has actually been captured by Beverly Barlow, who has trapped the crew in a virtual reality simulation. They're eventually rescued and life returns normal in Eureka, but Beverly once again escapes.
Yep.
And in the final episode, when the Department of Defense shuts down Eureka, the entire town is threatened by unstable wormholes. Zoe returns to Eureka before graduation, and Henry tries to save Grace, going as far as ask Beverly to help her. Carter puts on one of Fargo's devices to stop the wormholes, and the Secretary of Defense calls Fargo to tell him that they've sold Eureka. Grace returns when anonymous information about Senator Wynn was given to federal authorities in exchange for Grace's freedom. Joe asks Zane to marry her, and he accepts. Grant returns as Dr. Rockwell because he purchases Eureka, and he decides to keep the town running as long as Henry becomes director. Allison tells Jack that she is pregnant with their kid this time. And Jack decides to take Zoe back to college. And as you had said at the beginning, they pass themselves 5 years in the past as they come to Eureka, mirroring a similar scene in the pilot.
That's right. And if you go back and watch, it's the same scene.
It is. It's the exact same scene.
It's the same scene. It's like, oh my God, they look, and you don't even notice because Zoe kind of changes her hair and stuff as it's going along. Especially that like kind of last season where she pops up back and forth. It's like, oh, okay, she looks a little different. And then finally you see that last scene. It's like, oh, there it is.
Yeah, it's brilliant. But that's my recap of the show Eureka. I love this show. I've probably been through it 6 or 7 times. I watched it again just a couple of months ago.
Yeah, we've been going through it again here.
I love Eureka. I actually think I have to thank your wife for getting me into Eureka because she was watching it and I got into it. And then I had to go back and watch all the previous episodes when it started streaming. So it's one of my favorite series. I love it. I hope everybody out there goes and gives it a whirl. I know I gave away most of what happens in the show, but it's really worth a watch.
Yeah, but I mean, the information that you gave is it doesn't even cover, the nuance that's going on because it really is a character study and the characterization is great. Matt Frewer as
yes,
as the the dog catcher.
he is a scientific expert in animals.
Yeah.
All kinds of animals from insects.
He's a zoologist.
Animals. Yes, he's a zoologist and he's a brilliant one.
He's also the town dog catcher.
Yes, he is the town dog catcher as well. So cool. I hope everybody gives that a watch. It's like I said, it's a really favorite episode of mine, or favorite series of mine. So give it a watch. I hope you do. So with that, Zig, I will let you take over this week on the murdery side of the house.
Murder. Kids, today we're going to talk about the My Lai Massacre.
The My Lai Massacre.
The My Lai Massacre. So I got my information from the Vietnam War historical material at us.gov, the Smithsonian Institute, and Wikipedia. The My Lai Massacre. I'm going to muddle through the Vietnamese. I am not a speaker of Vietnamese, so please excuse some of my mispronunciations. Tham Sát My Lai was a war crime committed by the United States Army personnel on 16th of March, 1968, involving the mass murder of unarmed civilians in the Son Tin district of South Vietnam during the Vietnam War. Between 347 and 504 civilians were killed by U.S. soldiers from Company C, 1st Battalion, 20th Infantry Regiment, and Company B, 4th Battalion, 3rd Infantry Regiment, 11th Brigade, 23rd American Infantry Division.
What really sucks about this is how little I know about it, being the history buff I am. I always had history teachers that would teach up to Vietnam, but nobody ever went into it. And it was actually my my first college history professor,
Yeah.
we were getting towards the end of the semester, and we were getting up towards Vietnam, and I could really tell we're not going to get into Vietnam. And I went to him after class and I begged him. I said, "Can we please go into Vietnam? I want to learn about what happened during it." And so we ended up, but I don't remember this.
Yeah, they probably didn't get that far into it. I mean, this is pretty late. This is right after the Tet Offensive. Um, Honestly, if you really, really want a good dose of this, that Ken Burns documentary, which is like 10 parts, I think it's I think it's like 10 hours long. Um, Maybe it's five, maybe 5 2-hour parts. Anyway, because he starts in like 1830 and goes all the way up to today, and really and he intersperses it with, some of the soldiers and stuff from their perspective on both sides. And then he goes back into the line of the story. Like he'll be talking about the French in the 1890s, and then he'll get some interviews with some soldiers on both sides.
Yeah.
Really, really, really hard hitting stuff, but it's rough. This is one of the reasons the My Lai Massacre, because it did get publicized, although not as much as the people publicizing it would have liked. It did come out, like the Pentagon Papers and stuff like that. And really, really, it was one of the things that caused a lot of people to go, why are we there? What are we doing? What is the purpose? What is the point? What is, what's the dealio? And everybody was like, well, it's the domino theory. If one country falls, then another country is going to fall. Which, right or wrong, whether you agree with it or not, that is what happened in Southeast Asia. One country fell, and then another in fairly quick succession. Now, after 10 to 15 years, most of them went back to, I don't want to say a planned economy. They went back to a market economy with a single political party, basically, but it's not really, planned economy communism. Either way, political discussions aside, these things did happen, which is why I think we need to talk about them. Victims included men, women, children, and infants. Some of the women were gang raped and their bodies mutilated, and some soldiers mutilated and raped children who were as young as 12 years old.
My God.
Yeah, it is the largest publicized massacre of civilians by U.S. forces in the 20th century. 26 soldiers were charged with crimes, offenses, but only Lieutenant William Calley Jr., a platoon leader in C Company, was convicted. Found guilty for murdering 22 villagers, he was originally given a life sentence, but served 3.5 years under house arrest after U.S. President Nixon commuted his sentence. The massacre, which much later called the most shocking episode of the Vietnam War, took place in 2 hamlets of Song Mai Village in Quang Ngai Province. These hamlets were marked on the U.S. Army topographical maps as My Lai and BK. The U.S. Army slang name for the hamlets and sub-hamlets in the area was Pinkville, and the carnage was initially referred to as the Pinkville Massacre. Later, when the Army started its investigation, the media changed it to the massacre at Song Mai. Currently, the events is referred to as the My Lai Massacre in the U.S. and called Song Mai Massacre in present-day Vietnam. So My Lai, Song Mai are kind of interchangeable. The massacre prompted global outrage when it became public knowledge in November 1969. It was contributed to domestic opposition to the U.S. involvement in the Vietnam War, both because of the scope of the killing and the attempts to cover up the events. Initially, 3 U.S. servicemen who had tried to halt the massacre and rescue hiding civilians were shunned and even denounced as traitors by several U.S. congressmen, including Mendel Rivers, chairman of the House Armed Services Committee, 30 years later, these servicemen were recognized and decorated, one posthumously by the U.S. Army for shielding non-combatants from harm in a war zone. So yeah, 1999 is when they were all awarded those medals. Are the three guys that stopped it. In November 1969, Stanley R. Ressler, Secretary of the Army, and General William C. Westmoreland, U.S. Army Chief of Staff, directed Lieutenant General William R. Pierce, U.S. Army, to explore the nature and scope of the original Army investigation of what occurred on the 16th of March, 1968, in Song Mai Village, Quang Nai Province, Republic of Vietnam. The collection of materials commonly known as the Pierce Inquiry, which provided the results of General Pierce's investigation of the My Lai incident, later also known as the My Lai Massacre, is divided into 4 volumes. The report witnesses testimonials, exhibits material, and CID, U.S. Army Crime Investigation Command statements. So, Charlie Company, 1st Battalion, 20th Infantry Regiment, 11th Brigade, 23rd Infantry Division, arrived in South Vietnam in December of 1967. Through their first 3 months in Vietnam passed without any direct contact with the People's Army of Vietnam or the Viet Cong. Forces by mid-March, the company had suffered 28 casualties involving mines or booby traps. During the Tet Offensive in January of 1968, attacks were carried out in Quang Nai by the VC, the Viet Cong, 48th Local Force Battalion. U.S. military intelligence assumed that the 48th Battalion, having retreated and dispersed, was taking refuge in the village of Song Mai. A number of specific hamlets within that village designated My Lai through My Lai were suspected of harboring the 48th. And Song Mai was located southwest of the Bentangan Peninsula, a VC stronghold throughout the war. In February and March of 1968, the U.S. Military Assistance Command Vietnam, MACV, was aggressively trying to regain the strategic initiative in South Vietnam after the Tet Offensive, and a search and destroy operations against the 48th Battalion, thought to be located in Song Mai, became a small part of the U.S. military's overall strategy. Task Force Barker, TF Barker, a battalion-sized ad hoc unit of the 11th Brigade, was to be deployed for the operation. It was formed in January of 1968, composed of 3 rifle companies of the 11th Brigade, including Charlie Company, led by Lieutenant Colonel Frank A. Barker. Song Mai Village was included in the area of operations of TF Barker. The area of operations was codenamed Muscatine AO after Muscatine County, Iowa, the home county of the 23rd Division Commander Major General Samuel W. Coaster. In February of 1968, TF Barker had already tried to secure Song Mai with limited success. After that, the village area began to be referred to as Pinkville by TF Barker troops. Pinkville because they were harboring communists. Because back then, you call communists pinkos for some reason. I still don't know why. Because, generally the communist color is red.
Right.
I don't know why they chose pink. I don't know why that was a thing, but it was in the vernacular, so they called it Pinkville. On 16th to 18th of March, TF Barker planned to engage and destroy the remnants of the 48th Battalion, allegedly hiding in the Song Mai village. Before the engagement, Colonel Orrin K. Henderson of the 11th Brigade commander urged his officers to go in there aggressively, close with the enemy, and wipe them out for good. In turn, LTC Barker reportedly ordered the 1st Battalion commanders to burn the houses, kill the livestock, destroy food supplies, and destroy and or poison the wells. On the eve of the attack, at the Charlie Company briefing, Captain Ernest Medina told his men that nearly all the civilian residents of the hamlet in Song Mai village would have left for the market by 0700, and that any who remained would most likely be VC or VC sympathizers. He was asked whether the order included the killing of women and children. Those present later gave different accounts of Medina's response. Some, including platoon leader, testified that the orders, as they understood them, were to kill all VC and North Vietnamese combatants and suspects, including women and children, as well as all animals, to burn the village, to pollute the wells. He was quoted as saying, "They're all VC, now go and get them."
God, even the animal. I mean, jeez.
Yeah. Well, it was their food supply. Not only was it their food supply, you kill a water buffalo, they're not going to be able to plow their rice fields. So, I mean, in effect, it's a way to kill the food supply. And if you poison the wells, you're going to poison the groundwater.
Right.
And rice, rice grows in paddies where you got to put a lot of water in there. That's why it grows so well in Southeast Asia. I mean, before the Vietnam War, Vietnam was referred to as the Rice Bowl of Asia because they were able to grow so much of it. Because of the climate and the wet weather, they're able to get 3-4 harvests a year, whereas nobody else is able to do that. So there are different reports of what Medina said. Some say he didn't say kill the women and children, but there were enough people who point blank said he said if they're there, they're VC, kill them. Charlie Company was to enter the village of Song Mai, spearheaded by 1st Platoon, engage the enemy, and flush them out. The other 2 companies from T.F. Barker were ordered to secure the area and provide support if needed. The area was designated a free fire zone, where American forces were allowed to deploy artillery and airstrikes in populated areas without consideration of risk to civilian or non-combatant lives. Bernardo Simpson, a rifleman in Charlie Company, said, "We were told to leave nothing standing. What did we did what we were told, regardless of whether there were civilians." I will say this to our listeners. Just following orders will not get you off, kids. Not even in the U.S. Army.
No.
No, there is a military code of conduct that you are required to follow.
General orders.
Thank you. Geoffrey can speak to this as he has been in the Army. Yeah. If someone tells you to go in there and massacre a bunch of women and children, you can say no.
So basically how it goes, if you're given an order that is deemed immoral or illegal, you can refuse that order.
Yeah. You're probably going to get in a lot of crap for it, but that's what you're supposed to do. On the morning of 16th of March at 7:30, around 100 soldiers from Charlie Company, led by Medina, followed a short artillery and helicopter gunship barrage, landing the helicopters at Song Mai, a patchwork of individual homesteads, grouped settlements, rice paddies, irrigation ditches, dikes, and dirt roads, connecting an assortment of hamlets and sub-hamlets. The largest amount of them were at the hamlet Mai Lai. The GIs expected to engage the Viet Cong Local Force 48th Battalion, which was one of the Viet Cong's most successful units. I'm assuming because they were able to basically hide out in that peninsula. Although the GIs were not fired upon after landing, they still suspected there were VC guerrillas hiding underground or in the huts. Confirming their suspicions, the gunship engaged several armed enemies in the vicinity of Mai Lai, killing 4. Later, one weapon was retrieved from the site. So they were saying they were being shot at, but they only found one weapon. According to the operations plan, 1st Platoon, led by 2nd Lieutenant William Colley, and 2nd Platoon, led by 2LT Stephen Brooks, entered the hamlet of Tu Kung in line formation at 8 a.m., while the 3rd Platoon, commanded by 2nd Lieutenant Geoffrey U. Lacrosse and Captain Medina's command post, remained outside. On approach, both platoons fired at people they saw in the rice fields and in the brush. Instead of the expected enemy, the GIs found women, children, and old men, many of whom were cooking breakfast over outdoor fires. The villagers were getting ready for a market day, and at first did not panic or run away as they were herded into the hamlets was fairly common by U.S. forces coming in to clear the area. Harry Stanley, a machine gunner from Charlie Company, said during the U.S. Army Criminal Investigation Division inquiry that the killing started without any warning. He first observed a member of 1st Platoon strike a Vietnamese man with a bayonet. Then the same trooper pushed another villager into a well and threw a grenade in the well. Yeah. Next, he saw 15 or 20 people, mainly women and children, kneeling around a temple with burning incense. They were praying and crying. They were all killed by shots to the head. Most of the killings occurred in the southern part of Tu Kung, a sub-hamlet of Zom Lang, which was a home to 700 residents. Zom Lang was erroneously marked on the U.S. military operational maps as Quang Nai province as My Lai, which is why they call it the Mai Lai Massacre, because it was Zom Lang was marked as My Lai. My Lai was a couple of hundred yards to the left, ostensibly, but they were all basically the same connected little village, separated by like a rice paddy or whatnot. Mm-hmm. A large group of approximately 70 to 80 villagers were rounded up by 1st Platoon in Zom Lang and led to an irrigation ditch east of the settlement. They were then pushed into the ditch and shot dead by the soldiers after repeated orders issued by Kali, who also was shooting. PFC Paul Medlow testified that he expended several M16 rifle magazines. He recollected that the women were saying no VC and were trying to shield their own children. He remembered that they were shooting old men and women, ranging in ages from grandmothers to teenagers, many with babies or small children in their arms. Since he was convinced at the time they were all booby-trapped with grenades and poisoned to attack. On another occasion during the security sweep of My Lai, Medlow again fired into civilians side by side with Lieutenant Calley. PFC Dennis Conti, a witness for the prosecution, told of one especially gruesome episode during the shooting. A lot of women had thrown themselves on top of the children to protect them, and the children were alive at first. Then the children who were old enough to walk got up, and Kali began to shoot the children. Other 1st Platoon members testified that many of the deaths are individual Vietnamese men, women, and children occurred inside My Lai during the security sweep to ensure the hamlets could no longer offer support to the enemy. Then the livestock were shot as well. When PFC Michael Bernhardt entered the sub-hamlet of Zom Lang, the massacre was underway. I walked up and saw these guys doing strange things, setting fire to the hooches and huts and waiting for the people to come out and then shooting them. Going into the hooches and shooting them up, gathering people in groups and shooting them. As I walked in, you could see piles of people all through the village, all over. They were gathered up into large groups. I saw them shoot an M79 grenade launcher into a group of people who were still alive. But it was mostly done with a machine gun. They were shooting women and children just like anybody else. We met no resistance, and I only saw 3 captured weapons. We had no casualties. It was just like any other Vietnamese village, old Papa Sans, women and kids. As a matter of fact, I don't remember seeing one military-aged male in the entire place, dead or alive. One group of 20 to 50 villagers was herded south of Zom Lang and killed on a dirt road. According to U.S. Army photographer Sergeant Ronald Haberle's eyewitness account of the massacre, in one instance, there were some South Vietnamese people, maybe 15 of them, women and children included, walking on a dirt road, maybe 100 yards. All of a sudden, the GIs just opened up with M16s. Beside the M16 fire, they were shooting at the people with M79 grenade launchers. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Calley testified that he heard the shootings and arrived at the scene. He observed his men firing into a ditch with Vietnamese people inside, then began to take part in the shooting himself using an M16 from a distance of more than 5 feet. During the massacre, a helicopter landed on the other side of the ditch, and a pilot asked Calley if they could provide any medical assistance to the wounded civilians in My Lai. Calley admitted, replying that a hand grenade was the only available means he had for their evacuation. At 1100, Medina radioed an order to cease fire, and 1st Platoon took a break during which they ate lunch. Members of the 2nd Platoon killed at least 60 to 70 Vietnamese as they swept through the northern half of My Lai and through Binh Tay, a small sub-hamlet about 1,300 feet north of My Lai. After the initial sweep, the 1st and 2nd Platoon, 3rd Platoon were dispatched to deal with any remaining resistance. 3rd Platoon, which stayed in reserve, reportedly rounded up and killed a group of 7 to 12 women and children. Since Charlie Company had not met any enemy oppositions at My Lai and did not request backup, Bravo Company, 4th Battalion, 3rd Infantry Regiment of T.F. Barker, was transported by air between 8:15 and 8:30. It attacked the sub-hamlet of Mai Hoi, of the hamlet known as Co Li. And again, I apologize for butchering these Vietnamese words, which was mapped by the Army as Mai K. During the operation, between 60 and 155 people, including women and children, were killed. Over the remaining day, both companies were involved in the further burning and destruction of dwellings, as well as continued mistreatment of Vietnamese detainees. While it was noted in the court-martial's proceedings courts-martial. The courts is plural, not the marshal. I apologize. Proceeding that some soldiers of Charlie Company did not participate in any killings. It was noted that neither openly protested against them nor filed complaints later with their supervisors. William Thomas Allison, a professor of military history at Georgia Southern University, wrote, "By mid-morning, members of Charlie Company had killed hundreds of civilians and raped or assaulted countless women and young girls. They encountered no enemy fire and found no weapons at My Lai itself. By the time the killing stopped, Charlie Company had suffered one casualty, a soldier who had intentionally shot himself in the foot to avoid participating in the massacre, and just 3 enemy weapons were confiscated."
Damn.
Yeah. Okay, I'm about to say something else controversial. There is a reason why the soldiers coming back from Vietnam were called baby killers. This is why. Again, babies were killed by U.S. soldiers. And I understand that a lot of these guys didn't have any choice on going to Vietnam, and I think that's awful and terrible and everything else. But if you witnessed something like this and you didn't say anything, you're just as guilty. So if it hurts when they call you baby killer and you witness someone killing babies, choke on it. That's the most controversial thing I'm going to say today. According to the Peers Commissioned investigation, the U.S. government allocated commissions for inquiry into the incident, concluding at least 20 Vietnamese women and girls were raped during the My Lai massacre. Since there had been little research over the case other than the Peers Commission, which solely accounts the cases which explicit rape signs like torn cloth and nudity, the actual numbers of rapes were not easy to estimate. According to the reports, the rape victims ranged between ages of 10 to 45, with 9 being under 18. The sexual assault included gang rapes and sexual torture. No U.S. serviceman was charged with rape, according to an eyewitness, as reported by Seymour Hersh in his book on the massacre. A woman was raped after her children were killed by the U.S. soldiers. Another Vietnamese villager also noticed soldiers raping a 13-year-old girl. Warrant Officer Hugh Thompson Jr., a helicopter pilot from Company B Aero Scouts, 123rd Aviation's Battalion, American Division, saw dead and wounded civilians as he was flying over the village of Song Mai, providing close air support for ground forces. The crew made several attempts to radio for help for the wounded. They landed their helicopter by a ditch, which they noted was full of bodies, in which they could discern movement by survivors. Thompson asked a sergeant he encountered there, David Mitchell, of 1st Platoon, if he could help get some of the people out of the ditch. The sergeant replied that he would help them out of their misery. Thompson, shocked and confused, then spoke with 2nd Lieutenant Colley, who claimed to be just following orders as the helicopter took off. Thompson saw Mitchell firing into the ditch. Thompson and his crew witnessed an unarmed woman being kicked and shot at point blank range by Medina, who later claimed that he thought she had a grenade. Thompson then saw a group of civilians at a bunker being approached by ground personnel. Thompson landed and told his crew that if the soldiers shot at the villagers while he was trying to get them out of the bunker, they were to open fire on their own soldiers. Thompson later testified that he spoke with Lieutenant identified as Stephen Brooks of 2nd Platoon and told him that there were women and children in that bunker and asked if the lieutenant would help get them out. According to Thompson, he, the lieutenant, Stephen Brooks, said the only way to get them out was with a hand grenade. Thompson testified that he then told Brooks to just hold your men right where they are and I'll get the kids out. He found 12 to 16 people in the bunker, coaxed them out, and led them to the helicopter standing with them while they were flown out in 2 groups. Returning to My Lai, Thompson and other air crew members noticed several large groups of bodies. Spotting some survivors in the ditch, Thompson landed again. The crew member specialist 4A Glenn and Andrietta entered the ditch and returned with bloodied but apparently unnamed 4-year-old girl, who was then flown to safety. Upon returning to the LZ Dottie base in his OH-23, Thompson reported to his second section leader, Captain Barry Lloyd, that the American infantry was no different from Nazis in their slaughter of innocent civilians. It's mass murder out there. They're rounding them up and hurting them in ditches and then just shooting them. Thompson then reported what he had seen to his company commander, Major Freddie W. Watke, using terms such as murder and needless and unnecessary killings. Thompson's statements were confirmed by other helicopter pilots and air crew members. For his actions at My Lai, Thompson was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross, while his crew members Glenn Andrietta and Lawrence Colburn were awarded Bronze Stars. Glenn Andrietta was awarded his medal posthumously as he was killed in Vietnam on April 8, 1968, as the DFC citation included a fabricated account of rescuing a young girl from My Lai from intense crossfire. Thompson threw his medal away. He later received a Purple Heart for other services in Vietnam. In March of 1998, the helicopter's crew medals were replaced by the soldiers' medals, the highest the U.S. Army can award for bravery not involved in direct conflict with the enemy. The medal citations state they were for heroism above and beyond the call of duty while saving the lives of at least 10 Vietnamese civilians during the unlawful massacre of non-combatants by American forces at My Lai. Thompson initially refused to accept the medal when the U.S. Army wanted to award it quietly. He demanded it be done publicly and that his crew be honored in the same way. If it had not been for Warrant Officer Hugh Thompson Jr., we wouldn't know anything about this. It would have been covered up. Because he spoke out, we know what happened at My Lai, Song May, whatever you want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it for the My Lai massacre.
Dude, that's just, man.
Yeah. Yeah, that's rough, right?
Horrifying.
And again, I did say something fairly controversial. I'm going to apologize to you for saying it, but I ain't backing down. If you were over there and you witnessed people killing babies and didn't say nothing, or you killed babies while you were over there, regardless of the circumstances, when someone called you baby killer when you came back, you deserve it.
Right. Yeah, I know.
You know? And yeah, I feel bad for the guys that came back that didn't do nothing. You know, hell, a lot of those guys didn't even serve in combat functions. Most of the guys that went over there never saw a firefight.
I know. Man.
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, it was rough, right?
I know. But I appreciate you bringing the story to us.
Sure.
You know, just, man, it's rough.
Yeah.
Rough.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that will take us to the end.
I wonder why the Vietnamese don't like us.
That'll take us to the end of another recording week. As always, you can find more information about our show on nerderymurdery.com. It's our hub to everything that we talk about. Has links to the stuff we're discussing, plus pictures from what we've talked about. Plus, you can find the link to our YouTube page, which Zig so often keeps updated.
Well, thank you, sir. Yes, we do update that YouTube page pretty regularly. Matter of fact, I want to do some updates today.
Cool. You can also find the link to our merchandise page, where if you wish to show off your Nerdery Murdery fandom, please do consider purchasing something from our store. And if you wish to become a patron to our store, help us with the costs of keeping the show going. Both our merchandise and our patrons do help us keep on the air and keep going with the stuff that you want to hear.
Please and thank you.
Please and thank you. And last but not least, please don't forget to leave a 5-star review wherever you can. It really helps us and helps others find our content that may be looking for the stuff we're talking about. So with that,
I have been Zig with your Murdery.
and I've been Geoffrey with your Nerdery.
Cue the music.